Why I think the Air India crash is unusual. An Ash 2 presentation. So the Air India crash, as you would have heard of it was a terrible tragedy. About 260 people died, I believe, but it's extremely unusual. The flight was flight number AI-171. It was a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner that was mislabeled by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation as a Boeing 7378 Dreamliner. The registration was VTANB. The serial number was 36279, and it was an Ahmedabad, Gujarat, at Sardar Vallabhai Patel International Airport. It was going to London Gatwick Airport. At 1:38 p.m., the aircraft took off from runway 23. At approximately 1:39 p.m., the aircraft begins to descend from 625 feet. The co-pilot makes a mayday call, and no calls were made after that point. At approximately 2 p.m., the aircraft crashed. Now that's where it begins to get odd. The report states that the engines were set to cut off, but you wouldn't just turn off your car while on the highway. Okay, so I don't think the pilots just turned off the engines while taking off, but the aircraft wouldn't have taken off with the engines set to cut off. That means the plane would have had to have been in the air when the engines were set to cut off. Also, the CVR clearly shows one of the pilots asking the other why did he cut off. The other responded that he did not do so. So who set the engines to cut off? Well, according to a newspaper called The Hindu, a major electrical failure or software glitch could cause both valves to close, again removing engine redundancy by shutting down both engines. Also, an FAA Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin states that there was an issue with that the locking mechanism was not installed for the cutoff switches on many Boeing aircraft, including the 7878. I believe this is the most likely cause. If it isn't, then someone else must have been in the cockpit, which I find extremely unlikely as the pilots would have seen them. Another thing I noticed was that the aircraft had a takeoff weight of 2.30. I can't speak English properly, sorry. About 2,013,000 tons, kilos, sorry, which is only 4,000 kilos underneath the maximum takeoff weight, which is 4,000 kilos above it. This is probably why the aircraft couldn't recover. We have an excerpt from the preliminary report, although I'd expect a large amount of fuel for a long-range flight like this one. Another possibility is that the pilot, it was done intentionally, but from my research, they wouldn't have had a motive to do that kind of thing. So we reach my summary. I believe that the crash was caused by a mechanical fault or a program issue, or even accidentally setting the switch, as I said earlier, that there was an issue with the switches, that the locking pin wasn't inserted on some of them. I strongly doubt that the pilot set the engines to cut off. I believe that the aircraft couldn't recover as it had an extremely large amount of fuel, as is required for the international flights. I express my condolences to all those who lost someone in this crash. And now we have my sources.